Every bee serves the hive, not itself. Every role, no matter how small, sustains the whole. Here, former and present journalists gather like bees, drawn to what's raw, real, and sweet. Each story is a drop of nectar, gathered from the wild fields of experience, spun into something golden. From the sting of truth to the sweetness of healing, this is where we build the hive. Bees don't question their purpose, they simply build. They gather light from the broken things, turn it to sweetness, and leave the world better than they found it. We do the same. One story, one truth, one drop of honey at a time. This is the Honey Pot, where words heal, hearts rebuild, and purpose buzzes loud. The Honey Pot is brought to you by Madrala Law Firm, your legal team for life's unexpected stings, and by TrueCore Wellness, helping you heal from the inside out. Together, they keep our hive strong. Hey, honeys. Thank you for joining us on the Honey Pot. I'm Paulina Butska, and today we are joined with Judi Fergason. Now, Judy and I met, I guess in the news world, this would be a very usual way to meet. We met on a story. I was covering your sister and the way that she died, unfortunately. The reason why I thought it would be a great idea for us to kind of sit down is because, Judy, outside of the newsroom and outside of the story that we did, we really were able to cultivate a great relationship that's turned into a friendship because of the way that we were able to connect on your story, on your sister's story. So I'll let you describe kind of what happened to your sister because I don't want to take away from that. And then we'll kind of get into kind of what this relationship looks like for everybody who is out there on stories and kind of how you should be covering stories that are very tragic.
It's interesting because this week marked 3 years. Well, it was 3 years last month in September that my twin sister, Jody Thompson DeVries, was brutally murdered while sleeping outside of a church by a man who was targeting homeless individuals. And she was the first of 3 people that he killed. And his trial was supposed to start this past Monday, the 6th, and it's now been delayed until next November 2nd for the defense to get all their ducks in a row, apparently. So I think it will happen next year, but it will be 4 years at that point in time. And you and I connected because I had reached out to the station you were working at, and I was upset because they were just using the verbiage homeless woman, 57-year-old homeless woman. As you can imagine, my sister was a person, and a special one at that, who had a lot of challenges, but she had a heart of gold, and I miss her a lot. You approached me with such kindness and compassion that it just resonated with me in a very real way. And it's how you approached me and your sincerity and your empathy and compassion that makes us still remain connected today. And I think we'll always remain connected.
I will be transparent with you because when I was originally assigned this story, we go by the verbiage that police gives us, right? And so even when I was assigned to this press release and this press conference, there was nothing that we knew about what was going to happen or what police was going to tell us that they found somebody or how these murders were connected. We had just known that we had covered multiple homicides in the city that seemingly looked very unconnected, but were also connected in some way because it wasn't like there was one specific place. The only common denominator was that everybody was unhoused, right? And so that, but again, they happen at such different locations that nobody really was like, oh, this all had to come together. And the circumstances were all different. And so me being the breaking news reporter that I am, I'm generally one of the first people out on the story. And so we get to this press conference and we didn't know what we were going to hear. And all of a sudden I was like, holy crap, basically, like these are all stories that we've covered, either myself or my colleagues. And of course, the journalist in me is going, do we have a serial killer? And I know that the public loves these kind of stories, but what we really fail to I think you said it so well. We fail to kind of sympathize and empathize that these people that we're covering are human beings at the end of the day. They're not just a photo. They're not just a story. They are real people. And so when you had reached out, of course, they sent me out there because I trauma bond with everybody. And so I do. And then, I'm not going to lie about that. It's just the way that I'm able to connect with people. And so It's it was hard because obviously you don't want to say the wrong thing, but at the same time, you still want to make sure that you're telling the story correctly and you're getting the story out there in the time and doing your job. And so it really is a catch 22 when we talk about doing news and doing news properly. So um, I wanted to give you the best kind of care that I could on this story as I was telling it.
You so did. It's not something I could ever forget, as you can imagine. Um, and it's just been an experience where I think, like you said, trauma bonding, anyone who's been through some really difficult times, I think when you're really honest with yourself, that's exactly the best thing that you can do when you're meeting new individuals, is because we have more in common than we realize
Mhm.
sometimes. And I think I've realized I had more in common with Jody than I thought I did. It's one of those things where I think experiences that are really, really tough can make us bitter, or they can make us better. And I'm of the thought that there has to be some good things that come out of this. And I think if we look at the experiences in the right way, I think they really can make us better. And I think you feel the same way, because that's how you approach everything. And I really admire that.
Thank you. Well, I approach everything that way because I remember when we were covering, well, when we were being the story and we were the covering story, we didn't have those kind of kid gloves that people used with us. We had one reporter who was a very good friend of ours, and she did this beautiful spread on my father, but everybody else just used it as a sensationalized piece, like, oh, these two business owners, one kills himself and this, and, the kids. And then we were the talk of the town. And so I always knew. It's interesting that I ended up in this in this field because I always said I hated the news. I was like, how can you be such vultures? Like, how can you go into somebody's space during the worst part of their moment of their lives and just be there for a story? And I've been the person that's the worst part of the day for somebody, right? I've been that person who has to put a microphone in your face and be like, can you tell me about the worst day of your life? But I think my approach has always been, I never put the camera in your face first. I always approach you as a person. I always come up to you and I say, I'm here to do a job. You're welcome to tell me to go bug off. And there's been a lot of people who've said that. So it's not like that's something new, but it's always understanding that if there's something that I can do to make this process easier and I can give your loved one a voice, can you tell me what I can do? And so that's always been my approach because of the approach that other people did not take with us.
It really comes through. There's no question about it. And I don't think that another person could have done justice to the story and to me and my family as much as you did. And it's not something I'll forget, that's for sure. Um, my niece, Jody's daughter, she has a 1 year old little boy. She's married, and she's going to have another little boy right after Christmas time. And she just graduated from college. It took her 9 years on and off, but she just graduated in August, in Tennessee. So that's where she lives. And we went out there, of course, to celebrate her graduation. And she remembered the last time that she talked to her mom. um, they had a really, really good conversation, and Jody was having a really good day. And she was remembering all the classes that Dana had told her about. Data science is her degree. And Jody remembered with a lot of specificity the classes Dana had talked to her about. And Dana was just like, wow. She was just really happy that her mom was so engaged and remembering all those important details. And so I was really happy about that. You also mentioned trauma bonding, and my niece Dana, she uses the word trauma dumping. So you will have to meet her someday, and I'm sure that you will. She calls it trauma dumping because she says that that's how she deals with her reality and what she has dealt with in her life, which has been a lot. She says that she will tell the nail technician, her waxer, the lady at the bank, someone in line at Starbucks. It doesn't matter who. She is one of those individuals that is just remarkably strong, and that's one of the ways that she has gotten through these hard times. Is just she will basically share with almost anyone that really shows her kindness and compassion, or I mean, she wouldn't tell someone that wasn't having a conversation with her, but she's taken a very different approach than I have. I'm sure maybe it's a generational difference, but she inspires me. She really does, and so do you.
Thank you. You had reached out to us, right? Like you were very adamant that you wanted to do this story and you wanted your sister's name out there. You didn't want us just to be using a unhoused woman or a homeless woman, which is again we go into the nuances of the wording, but I think ultimately we're always looking for that person that we can speak to, whether it's family members or somebody. And so in your case, you came to us, but it was a kid glove situation because I knew that your story was going to get a lot of attention, as it did, and as it continues to get a lot of attention. And I also remember, again, I put myself back into the situation 14, 15 years ago now, where we became the topic of discussion for so many people. And you're navigating your own emotions around the situation that happened to you, and the emotional toll, but then you're also having to face the public and do so with grace, or you're having to navigate your words while you want to scream and you want to maybe be really nasty. And, or at least I know that in my case, when some people would say, things about my father that were completely asinine, you just wanted to kind of bark at them and be like, what is wrong with you? And so I never got that from you, but I'm almost positive that when they placed me on this story with you, they were kind of almost expecting like, Pauline, you're going to have to kind of, win things over here. And so smooth things out for us, because this family member is very upset of how we're covering this, and rightfully so. And I love that you were able to call us out, because I think there's a time and a place to call us out in news. And we get called out for everything from our makeup not being right to our hair out of place and the wardrobe that we have. But the things that matter are the people that we're covering and the families that we're talking about. And so those are the things that we definitely should be getting right. And so that was my approach. But I think, can you dive deeper as to kind of what it's like, for the general public who is now becoming the story? What was it like to kind of navigate all of that?
What a great question, Paulina. And when I think back, honestly, I hadn't even thought as far as wanting to do a story. I think I just wanted my sister's humanity to come through. I think that was my motivation and what I was thinking about. So I think I was a little bit petrified when you said, okay, I think it was around 10 in the morning that we talked, and you said, gosh, could you be available at 1 o'clock today to have a conversation with me? And I remember freaking out a little bit, at least on the inside, because that's just not something I've ever done. And everything, but I couldn't not do it. So honestly, I think I just wanted her name to be used, and I wanted to humanize her. And then once I talked to you, there was no question that I trusted you. I really think if it was someone else, that may not have been the case, and I would have just said, you know what, I just don't think I'm up to it. And because it wasn't easy to do, it really wasn't easy to pull myself together in that moment and then during that time. I think most of us don't go through something traumatic like that with your family member. We knew that Jody had a lot of really serious struggles, and we knew that her story would likely not end well. My brother and I knew that in our heart. But there's still no way to ever, in your wildest nightmares, imagine that someone could be brutally stabbed to death when they were doing nothing other than just trying to rest and sleep outside of a church, nonetheless. And so I was recently in Las Vegas this past week, as a matter of fact, and from my hotel room at the Palms, I think that's what it's called, I could see the area that Jody lived in when I first moved her there in 2008. It's right there near UNLV. I think Harmon and Rochelle are the two streets that she first lived on. And so it was emotional for me to remember that far back and how long she lived there. But I'm really grateful that's where she did live, is because I think she was able to endure as long as she did, because Vegas is a place that there's always something going on. There's always people busy and doing any number of things. And I think that she was able to work off and on, and she certainly wasn't homeless that entire time. She had some good years, and it was more of an intermittent situation with her homelessness due to her alcohol and drug challenges. But I will tell you that she lasted a lot longer than anyone I could have ever known. She had a strong strength of spirit, and she was just incredibly resilient. And so that's something that I'll always remember about her.
You guys were twins, right? That was one of the things that you had mentioned to me, which I didn't even realize. You wanted to make sure that your sister's name got out there properly. You wanted to make sure that, she didn't just come from a home that was, you know, unwell or unkept. Like, it was a good home. There were things that happened in your lives that just kind of brought her on this path. And I think from my perspective, one, I fought for this story, right? Because it wasn't just we were going to use her name or we were going to give you a minute 30. I was able to get a significant amount of time to tell your sister's story. And then we got a psychologist involved and we kind of broke down the psychology of a killer and things of that nature. And so we did make a bigger story out of this. So I'm thankful that the station allowed that for me and we made it a little bit, put music under it and we're able to really story tell. But on my end, the more I spoke to you, what kind of kept tugging at my heart was the alcoholism part, because uh, in my own family, my uncle is an alcoholic. Growing up, we saw that challenge. We saw my mom, advocating for my uncle and us not knowing whether or not he would survive the streets or he wouldn't. Luckily, he is in a institution now in Poland, back in Poland, but that took years. Every time that phone call would ring, we were just like, we're going to lose him. We're going to lose him. We're going to lose him. And so for you guys to get that phone call, I know it was devastating. But again, I wanted to use those kid gloves because I just knew that this wasn't going to be an easy road for you guys to begin with, to kind of grapple with this. But to have to do it in such a public way, everybody's going to experience death, right? That's the thing. It's inevitable. We're all going to experience death of a loved one, but not everybody's going to experience a traumatic death, and not everybody's going to have the public light on them as they're having to grieve. So those are the two things that really, tugged at my heart as we navigated your story.
Very much so. And yes, you're right. We were twins. We were fraternal twins. And so people often would tease us and say, how can you be twins? Because Jody's so tall and you're so small and all this kind of thing. We just had a tall dad and a petite mom. And so she took after our dad and I took after our mom that way. And you can imagine with the names Jody and Judy, you're called the wrong name half your life, at least half your life. And so that was always, and I still am called her name a lot. That happens a lot, actually. And so sometimes I'll say, depending on the situation, but that happens couple times a month, I would say. I'm called by the wrong name. It's just a natural thing that people do. My daughter's new roommate in Nashville, her name is Jody, and so it's not a very common name. And so it's nice when those little touch points or nuanced, kind of maybe it's just their way of saying hi.
There is still the process of you're having to face the public while you're doing this, and you're grieving in a very raw and public way while you're having to navigate. Like you said, it's been 3 years. You're not thinking you're going to get any justice until possibly even next year. So there's so many layers to your story and your sister's story. How do you navigate that?
That's a good question, and not one that I give a lot of thought to, honestly. But I think that I'm curious by nature, as was Jody. And so I respect the process to the point of I know it takes a lot of work to bring these stories to light and to the public's attention. And I think that it's something that there's no way around how the news is shared. It's going to be shared. Obviously, it's much more of a 24/7 news cycle than it used to be. And information like that, people are fascinated by it, and it was fascinating, and it is fascinating, just not in a way that you would want for your family member. And yet, nonetheless, it is fascinating, and I really appreciated that it led to the story with the psychologist or psychiatrist sharing the psychology behind stabbing in particular, and kind of sometimes what motivates those individuals for that type of particular crime. And so I'm a crime junkie, and Jody was too. And so that's kind of a just a coincidence, if you will, that when she have a lot of time to kill sometimes, she would on her phone, she often had, there were so many different phones that she went through over the years, but nonetheless, when she had a phone that had internet on it, she often would be watching 48 hours or or Dateline. She was just like me that way. She just really was fascinated by and captivated by those types of stories. And I think it's the people in the stories that make it fascinating and captivating. And I think that's what she found interesting in the stories. And it's one of those things where I've told a couple of people this. I think I told the gentleman who cracked the case, and it was cracked the very next week. So, even though it was a horrible thing that happened, the fact that the very next week they caught him. I mean, the whole thing was caught on video. So there were so many aspects to this that were positive. If you had to call it something, that it was solved so quickly, that it was, our family was just given the utmost degree of respect and professionalism and kindness and courtesy. And that's not something that I wouldn't think it's uncommon to happen. But in this particular instance, I just won't forget how empathy, how empathetic, excuse me, the everyone that we dealt with was, and that really went a long way. It really made a difference in such a difficult time.
I would assume that since the story aired, and because this is an ongoing trial, and this case is, while it's solved, it has not been solved in the court systems, there is still continued coverage of this, whether it's it's not as frequent, obviously, as it was 3 years ago, but there is still interest in this case. There are still people who are, obviously, I'm sure, calling you or kind of checking up on, where is the case stand or things like that. What has your experience been like with the news outside of your story with me?
There hasn't really been much beyond the first year, I would say. So at about the 1 year mark is when there was a preliminary hearing that my niece flew in, that we attended together, where the preliminary hearing that took place with evidentiary information to be deemed that it was going to definitely go forward to trial. And so the defendant was there in the courtroom. He kind of stared my niece and I down, and we just stared him right back down. I mean, we just did not give him one degree of, he wasn't going to get to us. He wasn't going to scare us. He's just not worth it. And so we weren't going to give him any satisfaction there. But there was a Denise, I think, is it Roche or Roche? So I think she's still doing what she's doing, or she was then. She approached us after that particular hearing, but neither of us wanted to share anything on camera. I don't think there has been much since, because there was initially he was deemed incompetent and spent some time in a somewhere in Nevada in a facility for about 6 months, and then he was deemed competent to stand trial. And since then, I don't think I've actually been contacted beyond one interview that was as he was coming back into court. I want to say it was just prior to a year, I would say, out. But what has been really good plus is that we're able to link in from video conferencing every time there's a hearing. We can follow it that way. The district attorney and his staff have been really, really helpful in keeping information coming for us, and to the point where they were going to put me up for the entire 3-week duration of the trial that they were expecting. I had already booked my hotel and my flight, but they said, no, we're going to cover that. We're going to put you up. So, I mean, those are the types of little pearls that just keep happening that make it a lot easier. But no matter what, I would be there. But those are things that I wouldn't have expected that have turned out to be really, really meaningful and really nice things that make it a little bit easier.
I don't know Denise personally. I do know of Denise. And was there anything, and this is maybe more of a general question, because as the public that is going to be consuming this isn't necessarily just the general public, a lot of it is going to be reporters, right? And so it's a lot of us who would like to hopefully make sure that we are doing, interviews properly, or we are approaching families properly. Is there something versus the first time that you were interviewed versus the second time when you were approached for an interview that kind of made you go, no, it's not the time? Or was there something that maybe a reporter should have done that they didn't do that would have maybe swayed your decision to speak to us reporters?
There was I want to say the Las Vegas Journal, or there was, it wasn't an on-air interview, but it was a conversation that took place over the phone that Sharina, I know her name was like Serena or Sabrina. She was very kind, and we had a really good conversation. And then I was able to send her a bunch of pictures, and I think I had done the same for you. But she used those in an article that went out that had a lot of pictures on it, and and I think my answer to that question would be, I think initially there was no question in my mind that I was gonna respond or return the phone call or the email. I just felt like I had to. I felt like I kind of had to be her voice, kind of carry the torch for her, so to speak, since she wasn't here to do that for me. But moving forward, I think, like my son was a little bit concerned that maybe I would feel obligated to continue to share the story, just out of obligation or out of duty or out of honor for her. But I think he was concerned that if it went to a national news show or something, that he was concerned that maybe people didn't have the right intentions. My son was worried that I would feel like I had to do it when maybe it was the best thing for me to do and maybe it wasn't. And he was going to support me regardless of what I decided. But he did have a conversation with me that he was a little bit concerned that his thought was, they don't know you. They may not care about you. They just care about the story. And I was like, that that may be true, but I know that's not true with you. I mean, I just know that in my heart. What's really fascinating as well is that this is a death penalty case. So that is something that I'm not I'm not upset about. I think it should be a death penalty case. If it doesn't warrant that, I don't know what would. But if it takes place next year, that's actually pretty remarkable because the DA, he said that before COVID, just a typical murder, if there is such a thing, would be minimum 2 years before it came to trial. That was pre-COVID. So, double that or triple that after COVID. And then for a death penalty case, that definitely ups the ante and the stakes immeasurably because the initial DA, the public defender, to be an attorney on a death penalty case requires additional credentialing and certifications and such. And it just makes everything a lot more difficult and a lot more time consuming typically.
I would also say, Judy, that if this does turn into a death penalty case, Nevada hasn't actually had a death penalty case that they've executed somebody since April 26, 2006. Daryl Linney Mack was put to death by lethal injection. The state has not carried out any executions since then. That will eventually garner more media. So I think your son, while again, his heart is in the right place, that not everybody's heart is in the right place always in the news. But you will find a lot of people like myself who do want to get the story right and they do want to sit down with you. And I've met both sides, right? I've worked in news long enough in my 10 years. You meet both people who are just really there for the story and then those who are there for the people that they're serving. And so I don't want to say no, that you won't get somebody who's maybe bad or good, but you're going to get a lot more attention if this does turn into a story that is a death penalty story, because that's going to be inevitable.
I don't know that that would ever come to fruition. I know if he's found guilty of first degree, the sentencing would take place immediately. So I do know that. And there would be opportunity for like a victim impact statement, whether my brother wants to do that. I know I do. I know my niece does. And so there's that opportunity. I think if it came back to anything other than a first degree guilty verdict, then the sentencing would take place about 45 days later, is my understanding. In my mind, there's no question that he would be found guilty, but I've had to come to terms with the fact that even though that's what my heart and mind tell me will happen, that very may well not be the case. And so I I don't think about it that much. I'd rather think of her than the way she died.
Let's talk about who Jody was, because I think that was the thing that we really wanted to shine a light on when we spoke together. We don't do a lot of stories on people who are unhoused, and if we do, it's generally very broad. It's very much the numbers are this, we see more and more people, this is the issue. When I worked in Kentucky, that was a major issue, but it was a lot of the city trying to like get unhoused people from this side to this side because this didn't look nice here in this part of town. And so it was those kind of stories, but we weren't necessarily going out there and meeting the public. Although I can't say that that hasn't been the case for other cities, because I know San Francisco, I have Alan Martin did a whole series on that, you know, and he did go out into the community and he did speak to people who are unhoused. And that was a very big story that he did out there. So I do know that these stories happen, but there generally has to be something big for these stories to make the news in the way that they did with Jody. And so I think let's talk about who Jody was, and then kind of how we got here, and then I think that'll kind of round about everything.
She was a firecracker, is what she was. She was very strong. She was radically authentic to herself. I mean, so she did things the way she wanted to do them, and she really couldn't be swayed to do things that she didn't want to do or that she didn't see the point of. And so she had a very strong sense of herself. She was a very devoted mom. That was by far her greatest love and joy was her daughter, very very much so. So it's hard now to see great nephew that Jody was never got to meet her grandson. That's hard. But she was inspiring in ways that she was just so bold and brave. She really wasn't afraid of anything. She really wasn't. And she kind of had a childlike fascination with the world where she never really grew up. Our sister died tragically when we were 16 in a car accident. And it's like she never really developed, critical thinking skills beyond that time. It's like she had just this really pure, adventurous heart and spirit, but sort of the tangible, important kind of nuts and bolts parts of life, she just had trouble navigating or kind of locking down well. And so she, from a responsibility factor, that probably wasn't her strongest suit. Being a very loyal friend, sister, mother, when she loved you, she really, she, there was a fierceness in her love and loyalty that she would, like animals, she would do anything for an animal. I mean, or someone that she thought was being mistreated. She would really do everything for. I mean, she was very generous that way. And funny, really funny. So funny that it's like, just, she would streak, she would just, you name it, she would do it. There's really nothing that she wouldn't do. And I still laugh about it. She really had almost no self-control in life. I mean, that's her in a nutshell, honestly. And as even though we're twins, I like to think I at least have some and fair amount of discipline. But so that was the joke. She had no self-control. I had a lot. We're night and day. She was night and I'm day, at least in comparison to Jody. But since she died, there's no question. There's just things about us that I think were more similar than different, even though we had a lot of things that were different too. So maybe that's the sweetest part of the story is
Coming
maybe
back.
maybe we're more alike than I thought.
Yeah. Now, Judy, as you were speaking, you brought back to memory the fact, like you said, you lost another sister, tragically years prior. You said in a car accident, correct? So I would expect that if it was a car accident, that also got news coverage.
Gosh, it was in 1981 on our brother's birthday. Other than being in the newspaper, Paulina, I don't remember. I don't remember anything really beyond that. We had a nephew who was just an infant that died as well. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
other than just it being a very sad one vehicle accident, I don't remember that there was that.
Okay.
And this was before essentially there was a lot in the way of counseling, and mental health resources and support. So this goes back such a long time that that wasn't customary at all. And maybe that's something that I've really seen improve over all of those decades is that like when this happened with Jody, the state of Nevada provided support and resources for her services, for her
Wow.
burial or cremation or burial, for me to get mental health grief counseling. That was offered, and that's something I took advantage of for the very first time in my life. And so that's something that definitely was a positive experience. As difficult as it was, it's something that needed to happen. I got mental health counseling, grief counseling every week for almost a year and a half.
Wow.
Right. The initial amount that I was provided, of course, I exhausted that and continued on, and I would have done it regardless, I think. But that was the impetus that made me do it. I thought, gosh, this
Sure.
if this isn't the time to do it, I don't know when is. And it was a difficult, gut-wrenching process, but it's something that really kind of made me change a lot of things in my life. And I don't think I would have done that had I not gotten that help.
I only ask that because, again, in my head, I'm going news coverage, right? Like my news brain goes, that's a story, this is a story. And so I would have loved to see on my end kind of what the difference was in coverage. But like you said, this was years ago. You were much younger. So even if there was news coverage, it could have been just, a blurb in the newspaper and then kind of people moved on. But obviously, it didn't just, people move on. But the families don't move on. The families kind of have to still continue to live on, right? And so we've talked about that prior, that was likely some of the reasons why Jody ended up the way that she did, and not being able to deal with all her issues. And so I'm glad that you were able to, so many years later, get all the support that you needed.
I really did. I really did. And there are clinicians like mine that are forensic. He actually had a lot of experience working in prisons with both perpetrators and victims of crime. So he really had both sides, experience on both sides of the table, so to speak. It really, really was time well spent. That I would encourage anyone that can tap into that type of resource to do so. That was really something.
I was going to say, what's surprising to me is just how much the state of Nevada has come together to kind of offer services, help. Like you said, the hotel during all of this. I don't know that even us as journalists realize that the families all get these kind of resources and help.
I think it's called a victims advocate. That initially was, it's actually the same individual has been there, for the last 3 years. Maybe changed roles once, but now I'm back with the same person that I started with. That's been a comfort. That really has. And there's no question in my mind that they've done everything they possibly can to keep things moving forward. I do, when I can sign on to these hearings, they're usually very brief. Sometimes they're just continued. You know how the court process goes. It takes much longer than we would like. There's still been a degree of being pretty impressed and having a lot of respect for the work that they do. Vegas is a place that I know more things like this happen in a big metropolis than a small town, so to speak. But nonetheless, I have a deep amount of appreciation and respect for the work they do, and I've sensed their commitment from the beginning throughout this entire process.
I think it's so wonderful to hear that in all the darkness that you guys had to experience because of what happened to your family, that there was this light in at the end of the tunnel for you. Whether it's the help and the, like you said, the pearls from people, the kindness of the city, the kindness of this victim impact. I would say it's like almost a social worker, right? Kind of for the families.
Similar. I think I live in Placer County in California. I know that there are those roles here just because I've happened to see them advertised, on media or such. These roles do exist. I think they probably are not paid enough for the work that they do, because I'm sure it's very gut-wrenching for these individuals to, get involved in all aspects of these cases. It's something that I think it will be good to turn the corner when the case is over, and hopefully he doesn't see the light of day. I think that's a piece of the puzzle that needs to be put there. I think there's sort of a closure is probably not the word I would use, but I think there's sort of a changing of the guard or turning of the page that will that will resonate more so once that's complete.
As much as, yes, there is that page that turns, justice is being served, the death penalty is a whole other, like, that's gonna be years before that even happens, execution. So again, it's like it's almost like prolonging the process, but not, and again, if this does come to fruition, my head, I'm seeing Netflix deals, I'm seeing book deals, I'm seeing things of that nature because of the fact that if this man does get executed in the state of Nevada, he would be the first one in decades almost.
I honestly would not expect him to be put to death in my lifetime. I'm 60 years old. Jody would be 60 years old now, and I that's not something that I would be holding my breath for. I realistically don't think that's going to happen. I'm kind of okay with that. I would be completely okay with him being put to death. I would not lose sleep over that at all. I don't think about him, but don't I do think about his family. I don't know anything about them, but I have empathy for his family. I don't really have any for him, but I have it for his family for some reason because I'm sure they didn't set out to have a son that would do something like that. And it's not just that that the murder took place. It was the brutality and the overkill aspect of it, which I wasn't told. My brother and I weren't told. We were just told that she died of multiple stab wounds. And this may sound morbid, but maybe because we are twins, I really wanted to know more than that. So I actually ordered a copy of her death certificate and the autopsy that was done on my sister. And again, I did that willingly. Nobody asked me to do it. People probably wished I didn't do it, but I did. It's just something I felt like I needed to do. And there's killing someone's bad enough, but there's absolutely no rhyme or reason in a million years for the overkill factor that took place. And for that alone, I think he should die.
What has this last 3 years been like as you've been navigating life in this new reality for you guys?
It's one of those things where it's not something that I talk about a lot or share about a lot with very many people. And I think I've just been selective about who I have shared that with. Really, the people that were there, close to me at the time that this happened, those are still the same people. But I think more than anything, it has given me a new perspective about that none of us ever really know what people are dealing with. And so it really underscores the need to demonstrate kindness because most people have been like, they don't even know what to say. I think it's always there. I've really tried to not marinate in it because that's not a very healthy thing to do. And she wouldn't want that. It makes me laugh because she really did make me laugh a lot and she still does. But one thing for sure, I know this without a shadow of a doubt. If it had been me that had been killed, she would be in jail. She would have a trial coming up because she would have killed that person. When I say she didn't have any self-control, that's what I mean. Like she would have, I don't know if she would have been successful killing the person, and I would never have advocated or wanted her to do that, but that's the kind of twin sister she was, and that's how much she loved me, that she would not have accepted that. She would have thought an eye for an eye. She really would have. It's just not in my nature to go and do that. And I mean, that may sound extreme, but that's that I hope she wouldn't have done that. But that's the type of person that she was. Like it just goes to show, like I think there's an unconditional love that takes place with siblings and maybe twins in particular.
I don't think you're far off. I mean, I didn't know Jody, obviously, but it's not like we haven't covered stories like that before, right? Where family members have taken it into their own hands to seek justice. So it's not that thought is so far off. And you would know Jody better. But I was in one way very happy that I was able to do your story because it spotlighted so many different things, right? Like I said, it was the serial killer portion of it. It was getting to speak to you and kind of give you a different perspective of, can we sit down and can I tell your sister's story the way that it should be? But then also giving me the opportunity to spark a broader conversation about homelessness in Las Vegas and what it means to be the person behind just these people that sometimes we're going by and we don't necessarily think about. We're just like, oh, it's just that person, or it's just that another homeless person that you're walking by. But it was a very humbling moment for me as well, to be able to kind of get that experience to give light to a situation that not always is in the spotlight.
There were a lot of people that I think knew her from being off and on the streets there, and that really cared about her because they, got to know her or had realized that even though she had had some scrapes, nothing serious as far as, being in trouble or anything like that. Just the ongoing challenge of just kind of keeping her life together. And she did avail herself and tap into resources there in Vegas. There were, I think it was Southern Nevada. There was some resources like where after COVID they turned a hotel into a residence for individuals like my sister that were trying to turn over a new leaf. So several times she was able to utilize those types of programs. She for a time lived at the Salvation Army, which it's like a big apartment complex type of thing. But what would happen is she liked to do what she liked to do, and she didn't like to be told what to do. For her, in definitely there were numerous instances this happened. She it broke my heart, but she would rather have been on the street in some ways than to be somewhere where she had particular guardrails that she didn't want to abide by, or she just wanted to be a free spirit and she wanted to do what she wanted to do. That always really struck me because I had a hard time understanding that. But when I think about who she was, it makes it easier to understand that. It's been a while, but I was still in touch with for a time after. He's a NASCAR enthusiast, I know that. And he lived next to her at one of these residences. We connected with him after she passed. He was struck by, I was like, well, she could be really, really challenging and frustrating to deal with. She had some anger issues that would really, really erupt when she was drinking. And she was a kind-hearted, really sweet person when she wasn't drinking, but when she was, she definitely had some anger issues that could be really, really tough to deal with. And so she she was in this guy's heart and mind in a way that I just was really struck by. And so I asked him after she died, I said, what was it about her that you continued to try to help her? You were kind to her. Like she would be moving maybe from a Siegel Suites or something like that. Like he would help her move. He was really good to her. And I just said, gosh, I'm her twin sister, so I know better than anyone else. Sometimes I just wanted to kill her. She just drove me crazy. And so what was it that made you hang in there? You're not her twin sister. You didn't have, not that I couldn't have turned my back, but you know what I'm saying. And so she, I just remember that he hung in there a lot. And he said, well, God, come on. He's like, she was gorgeous. Like he's like, hello, like she was gorgeous. What are you talking about? I'm like, well, yeah. And I'm thinking to myself, if you think she was gorgeous 3 years ago, he should have only, he had no clue how gorgeous she was, of course, as she was when she was younger. But nonetheless, he was really captivated by her. And one of the things he said that stuck with me is one of the last times he saw her, she had a cart or some kind of, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was a cart. And I don't know whether it was Flamingo or which street it was, one of the main streets there in Vegas. But he saw her, he was driving by and he saw her, and she was just walking along and she had these long legs and she walked with a purpose. I mean, she really had a strut of a walk, really. She had a very commanding presence and walk. As for a very slight, slender person, she really kind of threw her weight around a little bit that way. But she was walking with her cart, and I guess she was actually almost like skipping and did the little like where you put your ankles together like a little hop, where you like, with she was doing that as she was walking down the street pushing her little shopping cart. So I thought that was just like the best possible way to remember her, because I don't think, if it was me, I don't think I would have been doing that. I don't think I would have been doing that in that situation. I honestly admire her her strength of character to just remain true to herself in that situation.
From the victim's perspective, from the family's perspective, what is it that you can give us journalists, as a nugget of advice on how to proceed in these kind of stories and cases?
I would say, even though you're not in the same role that you're in, Paulina, now as you were then, to for those individuals that are in the interviewing or anchoring or sharing or capturing the story and sharing it, I think I think doing it very much the way that took place in our situation, and with Jody's case, in that I think that her story would have been shared well, but I feel like giving someone the opportunity to provide a little bit more color and context around the person and the story about who they were is always good. It's hard to do. It's hard to do, but I think just to take advice or lessons from someone like you, that in the moment in that situation made all of the difference for me to be able to share who she was, and what she was about, and some of the maybe maybe just personal things about her, or funny things about her, that a lot of times in something like this would have been lost or would have been overlooked or would not have seemed like it meant anything, but it does. I think it does. I think just the kindness, sincerity, compassion factor can't be cannot be emphasized enough how important that is, because if the person trusts you and they feel that you're sincerely concerned and have compassion about the situation, I think that makes every bit of difference in the person wanting to be able to feel comfortable and take the time, and even though it's hard to do, it's a way to honor their loved one.
On the flip side of that, is there something that you could critique us or critique me even in my approach that could have, maybe yielded even more of a better result?
I can't think of anything. Um, I maybe if I'd had another experience of a lesser degree to compare it to, but I don't, and it's not something you would ever want to see someone else that you love go through. So it's kind of hard to think about. Um, I honestly can't think of anything you could have done differently. I I would just hope that there's more people like you in those roles. My experience was consistent. You were the one that I connected with the most, but it was the other two women that I took time to talk to, or in Denise's case, one, I think it was just one little interview I did. But it's not about me, and I think that's the overarching point here, is that showing respect to the person that is here to tell the story is important, but it's still about the person that was a victim of the crime. Not that there's not far-reaching um, impact among family members, who love the victim. It's still their story, and I think at the end of the day, that's the part that it's important to me, because I just don't want her to be. I don't think she could be forgotten, but it's important to me that she's not.
I appreciate that. When I got into news, I had such a jaded news outlook on news, right? And I was just like, if I ever got the opportunity to do it better than people did by us and my family, then I would. And so I think that's always been my thing, and I think even in our story, like it was never about me. It was never about me putting myself into the story. It was never about like, I wanted to get the story. I did want to get the story, but I wanted to get the story done right. And I wanted to make sure that it was done in a way that would make sure that, like you said, you wanted to make sure that Jody's name was always out there and it was done in a way that glorified her and her life and really, yes, shined a light on how she lived and the situation she was in, but also reminded us that she was a person behind just that title that we were giving her.
I think the other aspect that comes to mind that you and I have talked about a little bit is the mental health component or need for mental health services or support for those of us that have experienced real heartbreaking tragedy, tapping into getting help for for their sadness, for their depression, for their anxiety, for their grief, for all of those things, for their trauma. And I think those are the ways that we can continue to honor individuals that are no longer here.
Judy, thank you so much for coming down this road with me again, because I know it's not easy, whether it's 3 years out or 14 years out. The emotions are still there, and I would like to encourage the journalists who are doing breaking news, especially. It's kind of like you're intaking not only your own trauma and grief that you have going on behind the scenes, but you're now taking on multiple people's trauma and their situations. So I would really encourage everybody to go out there and get help and speak to somebody, because those are services that not all stations have for us. First of all, I would really, really encourage those of us in the industry to go out there and seek help, because it helps. It helps in the way that you storytell. It helps in the way that you're approaching families. But it'll also help you kind of settle a lot of those demons that you end up kind of dealing with yourself as you're navigating through multiple Judy and Jody stories. I really hope that this helps those in the industry and hopefully family members who have been through kind of not similar but in different circumstances in the spotlight and media. Judy, thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure, and thanks again.
Thank you. A special thanks to our Hive sponsors, Madrala Law Firm, TrueCore Wellness, and Metamorphosis. Need real guidance beyond the mic? Head over to our Patreon. There you'll find Madrala Law Firm, offering insider legal advice for journalists, creators, and entrepreneurs. And TrueCore Wellness, sharing mental health and body healing practices for the heart behind the hustle. Your support turns words into healing and stories into honey.